Today is a special day, the emperor's birthday. The most respected people are invited, aristocratic families, businessmen, and more. They are all honored to be present at such an event. They try to congratulate with the most pleasant words, but at the same time, do not notice with what faces they do it. Emperor Yang sees everything, but he does not get upset. He invites them year after year only out of courtesy, because if he does not do it, some will be offended, and he will lose very important connections. Moreover, no one will refuse extra gifts. He received a huge amount of jewelry, gold pieces, a work of art, and that's just a small part of everything. In the meantime, a girl appears in the hall, who obviously came here for a reason. She didn't say hello to anyone and went straight to His Majesty. Complete silence appears. Only whispers of gossip can be heard. What can be expected of her and what she is doing here? While all the other girls had light and colorful dresses, she came all in black. Although today is a light holiday and, probably, everything is for a reason. Some people recognized her and started to resent her for having the nerve to show up here. That's the majority opinion. Not even men are not deterred. They do not understand how it is possible to wear this color of clothes and considered that she is not quite in her right mind. As it turns out, people's reactions are quite expected. This lady's name is Adele Oswald. She is a former marquis who has been disliked for a very long time now. There isn't a single person in this room who is happy to see her. But the girl doesn't pay attention to anyone, because she doesn't plan to stay here long anyway. If in general, people have been trying to figure out the reason why the emperor's consort invites this girl to his birthday every year after year. It's a real mystery that has been tormenting the people for several years in a row now. Adele was officially invited as a former marquis from a prestigious family, but to everyone in attendance, she is none other than the Villainess, a girl who married an old marquis who was old enough to be her father, only to climb the social ladder. When she got what she wanted, she poisoned him, but soon that wasn't enough. Adele seduced his son, and after that, manipulated him for a long time. He'd do anything for her to avoid being in his father's shoes. She doesn't have the best reputation among humans, but so far she's quite confident and not afraid of anyone. Meanwhile, she has approached the emperor and the moment has come to say something. She must have been preparing a speech, and this is what everyone is waiting for. People are gossiping that she's up to something, but Adele just wished him a happy birthday and stands there smiling sweetly as if that's all she came for. Surprisingly, His Majesty even smiled and admitted that, to be honest, the dress surprised him. Her style as usual, and she explains her choice by saying that she chose it in the hope that many nations would unite under the flag of empire. Except, truth be told, she barely had time to alter her one beautiful dress. And this is what came out of it. She chose to make up a story rather than acknowledge reality and show up in something she'd already appeared in more than once before. For them, being an outcast in the banquet hall is still preferable to looking like a pathetic beggar. Adele's reputation can't get any worse anyway, and she's used to being insulted. No matter what she does or says, people will always see the bad in her, and all she has to do is not take it to heart and not let anyone spoil her inner harmony, which she revived with great difficulty. Naturally, the girl did not come without a gift. His Majesty did not hold back and was the first to ask what she had brought him. The man saw a small box and understood that there must be something interesting there. As it turned out, Adele made these cookies with her own hands and hoped that it would be appreciated. Diamonds and jewelry brought enough, but no one has not thought of such a thing. Nothing like this has happened in all the time he's been accepting gifts. The man doesn't even know how to properly respond to this or what he thinks about it. Naturally, others called it a disgrace, because they don't understand how you can bring some cookies on such a day for the emperor and present it as if it were something special. The girl was not confused. She told him that this was her unique recipe and these cookies were different from anything he was used to. Even the wife laughed, but Jan was curious. He even ordered everyone to shut up. The other guests did not bother, gave all the usual things, but Adele distinguished herself and he liked it. The man stopped listening to his wife. He thought that it was really much more interesting to get something unusual than some jewelry that would be lying around in his room. He had enough of that kind of goodness already. Immediately there is gossip in the hall that her cookies should be thrown in the trash immediately. Supposedly, it is still unknown if she will try to poison the emperor as well as the marquise. The girl didn't react. It was much more important to her what the emperor thought about it. Also, she promised that if he got scared to try them, she still wouldn't be offended. He doesn't have to trust her, but still, there's plenty of witnesses and no point in her doing something like this. Adele was just thinking how much she wanted to go home to get out of that suffocating dress when Count Weiss, the Emperor's chief aide, appears. He was supposed to be there at the beginning, but it happened to be delayed, and he apologizes sincerely for that. The girl has heard of him before, and it seems, judging by her reaction, the guy is clearly unknown for doing good or safe deeds. Count Weiss, the most popular man in the Empire, known to all, he is hailed as the hero who made the greatest contribution in the long conflict with a neighboring country. However, unlike the fierce warrior, he is incredibly handsome, and surprisingly, he is still single. Girls only see him as immediately go crazy. He charms them with one look, and of course, all dream of becoming his wife. They are attracted not only by his looks, but also by his possessions, which the guy could compete even with the Emperor. When he looks at someone, girls lose their temper and do anything he asks. Meanwhile, Jan is very happy to see him and was excited to tell him what Adele had prepared for him. But for being late, he won't give him anything to try, even though they have a very good relationship. Such a thing is not acceptable for the Emperor's chief aide. Weiss understands this and is ready to redeem himself. He is a very responsible person who is always accountable for his actions. Suddenly, the Emperor says that since it's such a day, he'll forgive him and let him try the cookies first. The Count gladly agrees, takes a small bite, and everyone eagerly awaits what he has to say. People were expecting to hear something like, "Horror! How can you eat that? I won't let the Emperor even taste it." And in the end, the guy didn't expect it, but it's the best cookie he's ever tasted. Not only did the Emperor want to eat it, but people were wondering what was so special about it. His Majesty looks at these cookies so much that the guests were even offended. He didn't react like that to expensive gifts, and he paid more attention to the cookies than to each of them. Words can't convey what the girl feels inside. She has more confidence now, but she doesn't show any of it, acting very reserved so as not to get excited before time. There is complete silence in the hall. Everyone is waiting for the verdict, as if someone's life depends on it. Jan wants to like it so much that he doesn't even know which one is better to choose. He's afraid of being disappointed, but once he takes a bite, he can't even find the words to describe how good it is. What she made is a true work of culinary art. The cookies are moderately sweet, very soft, and the smell of them is maddening. The Emperor can't stop. He's already eaten 5 of them, and he doesn't even know how to stop. But that's not all. The best part was ahead of her. Weiss is so pleasantly surprised that he offers her to be his partner. The girl does not quite understand what it means, what she will have to do, but in any case, to refuse such an offer is clearly not worth it. All the more, how can you refuse to look into those emerald eyes that sparkle as well as the most precious stones? Adele is talking to this man for the first time, and now she understands why everyone else is crazy about him. She'll fall in love with him at first sight. She didn't even think about it. She agreed, gave him her hand, and thereby made a contract. And what he meant by the word partner, it didn't matter anymore. There's another reason why she didn't question it. This man reminds her of the boy who cried and begged her not to leave 10 years ago. They are very similar. And so Adele could not refuse the man who reminded her of the past. All the factors came together, and apparently the best part begins. The girl will be very happy to cook for him as much as he wants, as long as she gets it right, of course. And the guy didn't mean something else that Adele wouldn't be ready for. Anyway, she said yes, and there's no going back. No sooner had they shaken hands than he gently takes her by the waist and starts a slow dance, though there is no music. The girl tries not to react to it. She takes it like this. He's just really happy to cooperate, and it doesn't mean anything. She had just calmed down, accepted all the circumstances, when suddenly, Count Weiss says a phrase, as if alluding to a time and a meeting which should have taken place much sooner. His look changed. She understood him without words, and when he saw her reaction, he said, "I missed you." He should have found her earlier, but for some reason he only did it now. And in the meantime, Adele is going crazy and wants to be alone with him right away. She has a lot of questions and wants to know the answer to every one of them. At that moment, when she knew nothing yet, had managed to compliment him on how well he danced. And now, the Count smiled and reminded her who had taught him to do it. Years ago, when they were very young, practicing every day, but there was no way he could keep from stepping on her feet. It was the biggest problem. It made her legs hurt all the time. It left bruises on them that turned out to never go away. The guy apologized and even offered to drop it. But Adele was patient and made a promise to herself that she would make him a better dancer. She believed that he would excel and forget the awkward feeling when a partner starts shouting and asking to be careful. They devoted all their time to it, suffering from blisters, forgetting to eat, forgetting to drink, not forgetting only one thing: practice and repetition. The girl didn't understand how one could not understand elementary things. They had devoted whole days to it for months. He had made the same mistakes and it seemed all for nothing. His small successes were kept on her patience, which was thinner than a thread and more fragile than a drop of water. She herself does not know how she could only hold out, and only after 6 months of lessons, they were able to see the first results. Her feet were finally healed. There were no bruises, no blisters, and exercise was starting to feel good and yield good results. When he told this information, of course, there was no doubt that it was him. No one else could have known about it. It was Chris. But for some reason, everyone calls him Weiss. Maybe it's his middle name or surname, although it doesn't matter. And then she realizes that he probably meant by partner to mean just one dance to tell her about himself. Adele has so much to ask, because after this you can't act like they're strangers anymore. It just depends on whether he has the time to do it. And meanwhile, she felt a little funny, for it turned out that the girl had not danced for a long time, had forgotten how to do it, and he had then learned so well that he surpassed his teacher even after so many years. The guy smiled and started telling her what she used to tell him. They had their own methodology that helped her remember everything very quickly. This dance became very special, and hardly anyone in this room can imagine how much. To them, it looks like common courtesy, but something more happened between them. And when he started to take matters into his own hands and press down so hard it wasn't exactly polite anymore, Adele got goosebumps. The light touches were in the beginning, but now he's acting differently. His gaze is more sensual, as if he's not telling me something. The girl knows him very well and is afraid to hear something she's not ready for, because if it's what she thinks it is, it'll be something she couldn't even dream of. If you look at it from the outside, it's very clear. These two are so focused on their feelings that they've stopped noticing the gossip that no one even bothers to whisper. Some frozen in one place, especially the girls who had just lost the hope of their lives. They always dreamed of being in her shoes and don't understand why Adele still hasn't cried from happiness and doesn't look like the happiest girl in the world. It was because she missed that time. It had been carefree, brighter, and she couldn't forgive herself for leaving him to this day. She is too ashamed and embarrassed to smile in front of him, as if all this time she had never once thought of him, or regretted the terrible act. A few days later, the girl has already had time to realize what happened and still can't find a place for herself. She's ashamed that after everything she did to him, Chris didn't hate her, but instead everything was fine. And she was also sorry that at a time when she should have been happy to see him, there was no smile on her face. He could only see sadness and shame. Adele herself ruined such a beautiful moment and doesn't know how to go on. It's so important to her that she has already forgotten that she was talking to a person. Most likely it's her friend who is eager to know how the banquet went. She asked a lot of questions, and Adele doesn't seem to hear her. She's all in her own thoughts, and it's not very nice of her. A friend was worried that Sylvia might have shown up, but she didn't. Although the girl didn't even tell even that. She's acting really weird and making up problems that don't exist. Instead of wasting time, it's better to talk to the guy and figure it all out in one go. Eventually, she was able to go back to the conversation and tell it all over again until the very end. The friend was sure Adele would be set up, or she would definitely get into some kind of trouble and doesn't understand how it could be that nothing of the sort happened. But what she's most interested in is the fact that if everything's so great, why is Adele upset and obviously not telling us something? Though she had told him that she had danced with the Count, the fact that he was not a stranger to her, she had seen fit to keep silent. Usually a girl can't be stopped, she's always talking about something. But today she didn't seem like herself. Her friend suspected something was wrong and was sure to find out everything. There were never any secrets between them, but suddenly the girl changed abruptly and is still sitting there stone-faced. And then the test begins. The friend has no idea if it's true or not. She decided to say that only those who have fallen in love and are afraid to admit it behave this way. Adele changed immediately. She got nervous. Mia found out everything for herself and thought that if her friend wanted to, she would tell her herself and she wouldn't push her anymore. It was a little frustrating inside. She always shared this kind of stuff with her. And here Adele is silent and nervous. Moreover, she screamed and is trying to prove it isn't true. Her red face speaks for itself, and she can prove whatever she likes. And then the most interesting thing began. Her friend couldn't help herself. She remembered that Adele told her how she danced with Count Christian Weiss. First of all, as soon as she said his full name, Adele realized that he was Chris, and Weiss was his surname, as she thought. And secondly, her friend warned her that if there were any secrets between them, there was no point in being friends anymore. The girl fell silent. She wondered how much she was willing to talk about it, because she didn't really want to, but at the same time, she didn't want to fight with her friend either. She hasn't figured it out for herself yet, so it's very hard to discuss it with anyone. Even better, a friend, but she can't even tell her that. She's also afraid that she'll hate her because she's jealous of her, because everyone really wants to be with Chris, and Mia is no exception. During the conversation, they recall a very important point. Traditionally, empresses came from families that were members of the Council of Elders, but the current empress is not from a prestigious house, and the emperor's power is not strong enough to control the council. Besides, the crown prince is still a child. That's why the emperor needs someone to be his right-hand man, a young, able nobleman who is outside the Council of Elders, but strong enough and to stand up to them. Now she has a better understanding of who he is, what he's striving for. It would seem she should be happy for him, but for some reason, it feels kind of weird. Her friend notices Adele starting to pale. She thinks too much and forgets that everything can be solved with one conversation and not suffer. Is she so worried about the guy wanting revenge that she's just pretending that she's suddenly decided to open up and start from scratch? She got tired of talking about it, changed the subject, and said she was hungry, started looking for some food because she was about to faint. Out of the blue, the door opens and the maid comes in, saying that they have a guest. Her name is Tatiana, and judging by her, someone very important has come to see them. Mija asked her to calm down and calmly tell her who she saw. They don't understand anything that way and only waste time. The girl barely has time to catch her breath. She has no idea who they are, but she definitely saw a huge carriage driving nearby. Everyone understands that such carriages can't just appear here, except that it's not clear what it means, whether good or on the contrary, bad. The friend and the maid very often confuse ordinary guests with those who could theoretically be looking for Adele to avenge her ex-husband. This time they also thought they'd have to protect her, but the girl doesn't even think about it and is sure everything is fine. If someone wanted to get back at her, they would have done it a long time ago, or at least tried to, but it's been years, and even if they did, it wouldn't cost her anything to poison those people as well as her ex-husband. Sounded a little grim. These two still couldn't get used to her jokes and rarely distinguished them from what she was saying seriously. Meanwhile, they heard someone stop near the manor. Different voices could be heard, and it must be the carriage that Tatiana had come to warn them about. She opened the curtain slightly and asked them to step back, while she herself looked to see how many people were there, wanting to hope that they weren't scared for nothing, and these people hadn't come to see any of them. No one understands who is inside the carriage. This man is still inside, and it is not at all clear whether he has seen someone or not. The window is transparent only on one side, and it is impossible to know what he is doing there. He could very easily look through their window, and if he came to Adele's, he'd have no trouble finding the right room. And then a boy came out of the carriage, which made the maid's legs tremble. Adele, of course, suggested that it might be the Duke, but she thought that such coincidences did not happen, and it was unlikely that he would return to her so quickly. No sooner had the girl thrown out the window than this man was already knocking on the door, and as it turned out, it was indeed Chris, who she had been going crazy about all this time. In the presence of her friends has become so awkward that she no longer knows how to greet him. Also, they would very much like to make an awkward situation. After all, he wants to talk only to her, and Gabe here is not alone. He's wearing a very thin cloak. The Duke is freezing, and he's decided that until she opens the door for him, he's not going anywhere. And Adele hasn't even seen the bouquet in his hands yet, which he can give her only in two cases. The first, Chris noticed that she was in a bad mood and decided to fix it. The second case, less likely, he liked her, and the guy decided to make the first step like a real man. To all of this, don't forget the past, after which any other person in his position could, in theory, want to get back at her, and it could well be a play to gain her trust, and then do the same as she did to him. Would not like it to turn out that way. And meanwhile, the girls were not confused. They left them alone and wished them a good evening. Adele accepted this gorgeous bouquet, thanked him, and asked him if it was not difficult for him to drop everything he had to do and come despite such terrible weather. She's really uncomfortable, hard to talk to, but at the same time, she wants to ask me a lot of things. This time, the Count did not stall. Hint about something, smile. He came on business. to find out what had tormented him all this time, why she had left him then, and did not say a single word, although they were very close and he had the right to know the truth. That's exactly what she was most afraid of hearing him say. And since the guy's already here, through tears, through fear, but she has to explain everything. In the end, she pretended to misunderstand him and took the question as if he was wondering why she had left the banquet so early, rather than then, years ago. The girl started to explain that she just didn't want to distract him and said that she had just come to give him a present and hadn't planned to stay long, as if it didn't mean that he had done something wrong or she wasn't happy to see him. She's afraid of a sincere conversation like fire, even pretending to misunderstand him, though it's for nothing because he'll get his way anyway. To make Adele better understand what he had come to do, he reminded her that she always ran away at the worst possible moment, and today was no exception. It was a little harsh, but I can't do it any other way, so I'll have to talk straight so she doesn't pretend she doesn't understand again. She tries to change the subject, asking how he's feeling, even though nothing of the sort has happened, especially since he's been on the battlefield for a very long time, and there's no need to worry about him. The Count felt very hurt that she was no longer the same person who had been sincere with him and was not yet able to make up excuses on the fly. She's a stranger now. It doesn't feel like the comfortable environment he was hoping for. It would be a shame if this meeting didn't change anything and he just went back. He asked what she had been doing all this time, what had been bad, good, interesting, to which she replied very briefly that everything was fine, as if to imply that she didn't really want to discuss it with him. And also, it was a little disheartening to hear that she was doing well, even though she could pretend it was a little off-putting. In fact, Adele is very happy to see him, and would even like to forget about the past and start anew. But the fear that he might take revenge on her suppresses her strength and desire to be with him. Meanwhile, they started walking around her house. She gave a little tour and told him how much she likes to decorate everything with flowers. He's not that kind of person at all. He's more of a minimalist and thinks that almost everything from here should be thrown out and make room for it. There's not a single empty shelf here, full of obscure objects, and the space feels cluttered. Not to mention it's long overdue for some ventilation. And after a while, the guy politely said it was time to go back. He didn't want to waste her time. He sees how hard it is for her so far. He only warned her that he would come again, but on what day, he doesn't know yet. He wanted to see if she would be happy about it or not, but the girl reacted as if she hadn't heard anything good and pleasant. He asks what's wrong, and Adele hides her eyes and doesn't even look in his direction. She doesn't think at all that a little longer, and he'll get tired of running after her, and not seeing that she appreciates it in the least bit. She doesn't know what she's thinking about it. She hasn't had time alone yet. It's all a blur. There's no clarity. There's pressure all around. Lots of questions. She's got plenty of them too, and every time she feels worse and worse. And then he said goodbye in such a way that she was almost speechless again. Adele hadn't felt anything like this in a long time, and even she was afraid to admit to herself that she liked it. The guy looks at her for a long time, doesn't go anywhere, just presses in harder and harder. The girl has doubts about what it means, although everything is clear. Christian, unlike her, does not hide his intentions, both by words and actions shows what he really wants. He's not afraid to be real. And Adele, even though she's okay with it, for some reason resists and is afraid of the unknown. If it hadn't been for the shame of what she'd done, things might have been different. Though she'd done it herself, and now it was time to pay the price. Many years ago, he was the nearest and dearest person to her. She treated him better than her parents or anyone else. And now, because of her own mistake, she suffers greatly. And here begins the most interesting thing. The guy knows perfectly well how he pressures her with his mere presence, and he asks if for so long she has not fantasized and imagined him before going to bed. The girl realizes what he means. The puzzle is forming in her head, and while he says he's had it more than once and would love to make it real, Adele realizes where this is going. He's no longer as polite and shy as he was this morning. Chris has waited a very long time, and now he can't hold back when there's an opportunity to do it right here and now. His eyes are full of madness and desire. She sees and understands it very well. The eyes are the mirror of the soul, through which you can see everything and more. In so many years, the girl had learned how to get out of difficult situations. He only touched her face. She did the same, only the way she had done it before. When he was very young and it was appropriate, but now, from the outside, it looks a little weird. He even felt for a second like that little Christian, who couldn't even imagine what would happen to him after all these years. She recalled how she used to admire the beautiful face, but the guy wouldn't give in. He was so unstoppable. He replied that it was sometimes very pleasant to remember those times, and now asked to listen to what he wanted to say to her. The Count wants to kiss her and asks her not to resist, because it's his dream, and if it doesn't come true, he won't survive it. She just heard the word kiss and reacted immediately, as if she were some kind of monster that had trapped her and didn't understand rejection. She pushes him as hard as she can, starts screaming, and doesn't even think about how Chris feels at that moment. She couldn't think of anything else to say. She just blushed and started clenching her hands into fists for some reason. Adele starts to make excuses, even though she realizes she's ruined everything. Now he might be offended and unlikely to visit her next time. It's amazing how he's still holding up and even smiling. The guy starts to ask if he's gotten so ugly that he's made her blush like a tomato. She was very indignant and begged her not to call her that. Especially as an Earl, he must know what manners are. From this point on, not only her patience starts to crack like glass, but Chris's as well. He doesn't know how to approach her. She's more stubborn than he thought. But he seemed very restrained to Adele. She didn't expect him to last even a minute. At some point, the girl remembers that earlier. The phrase, supposedly she is very stubborn, he said very often. She even laughed a little and remembered a few funny moments. He felt awkward and wanted to get out of here as soon as possible, but it would be wrong to say goodbye at a time like this. In the end, they never got to have a proper conversation, and the meeting was even worse than the first one. And of course, no one decided anything. She didn't get to ask her questions. He didn't get to say anything either, though he tried to kiss her, but he still embarrassed himself. And suddenly, after a time, when the two of them had calmed down, he gave the conversation another chance and asked if she had really poisoned her husband, as everybody said she had. He asks to answer as honestly as possible because he's going to find out and talk to other people about it anyway. If you'd think she'd internalized all her mistakes, would be able to have a normal conversation? But no. The girl changed the subject again and asked how long ago he became so noble. There's immediate disappointment in his eyes, no matter how much he tries to make the first move. Adele screws it up and does it on purpose. He doesn't have the energy to do anything anymore. He just wants to go back. And since she's so indifferent to everything they've lost, why should he be the only one trying to get it back? Suddenly, a miracle happened. And when he had already decided to say goodbye, the girl offered to stay for dinner. Although there was no food at home, she promised to think of something. For starters, she asked him what he was used to eating every day, because perhaps their diets might be different, and it would be wrong to cook without clarifying if he had any wishes or restrictions. She's even more embarrassed, even though nothing has happened, but the background anxiety is still there. It's like she's forgotten that she's in her own home and he's the guest. But on the contrary, Chris is glad she's doing something for him, because it seemed like everything was gone. At least she's given it some thought and is trying to take care before it's too late. I wonder how long it must be before she feels as confident around him as she used to. Adele goes into the closet and asks him to stay put. The most he can do is walk around the room, but she asked him not to follow her. This only made him laugh. The Count promised to stay put, though he thought it would be a good idea to defuse the situation and scare her off. He has some weird ideas, but at least he doesn't act like she does, and if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't even have met. At some point, he begins to remember a situation when he looked at the portrait of the former Marquise and could not even think that sooner or later he would decide to reappear in her life, and without the purpose of revenge. He collected all possible portraits, drawings, and information about her, and it turns out, even thinking about a relationship, he had feelings as soon as she disappeared from his life. Chris realized that he couldn't live without her and was preparing to show up for a very long time. Thoughts of her have kept him busy since the first day he was alone. But there's one more thing he can give into, though he tries not to. The thing is, as everyone knows, Adele has valuable documents, and after she betrayed Christian, he has every right to take revenge and make sure he has them. He's even discussed it with the Emperor, and he's supported the idea more than once. Chris is just trying to find the right thing to do so he won't regret it. He had been in doubt for a long time about whether it was more important to repair his relationship with her and get over his pride, or to take the easy way out, take revenge and get the documents for himself. If he just decides to do it, the Emperor will gladly want to help and there will be no problem. If he fails, no one will even punish him for trying to do it. But the last time he spoke to His Majesty, he promised he'd get those documents and he'd do it by any means possible. It turns out they have a deal, and all these attempts to talk to her, it's not out of love, he just needs to gain her trust, which is not surprising. In their case, after all that time, it'd be weird for a guy to love her for that long and just show up in her life for no reason. Adele is hesitant for a reason and has been so afraid to trust him since the first day he came into her life. At first, you'd think she'd be too shady and only miss out on such a wonderful man. But she's smarter than you'd think. And after half an hour, she was able to cook something. Not the fanciest dish, but she didn't owe him anything. She's been on the unit for a while. She's calmed down and no longer looks like she did then. She's watching him closely, and given everything that's transpired, things look completely different now. I don't feel sorry for him now. I just want to wait for the moment when she finds out and doesn't let herself get hurt. The girl served him the mushroom soup and stepped back for a couple minutes. Now was the perfect moment to hide the documents. Though she wasn't thinking about it yet, it wouldn't hurt to do so. Either way, it would be better if she supervised him. But when she left and asked him to stay here, she couldn't even imagine how much of a risk she was taking. There was one situation 10 years ago, in winter, at the garden lake. The girl helped her mom at the store and never left too late. Also, often worried about making sure lunch for Chris didn't run out. I had to leave often to come back early and cook for him, and he forbade me to cross the frozen lake. Only in order to feed him as soon as possible, we had to take a shortcut and go where it was very dangerous to. Once a girl steps on the ice but it's too thin, and she falls through the water in seconds. The girl was in a hurry, didn't check the strength beforehand, stepped too far, and it was already very difficult to get out. He happened to be nearby. He didn't tell me and he was out late with his friends. He heard some screams. He ran to save the girl and she turned out to be Adele. She was very lucky, because if he hadn't been there, or if he had heard her a minute later, she might have drowned, and it would have taken a long time to find her. Chris, as he felt, agreed to go for a walk, though he usually refused and didn't like to go far from home. Adele felt very guilty, little that she had endangered her life, and when she woke up she imagined what might have been if he had just frozen and not found the strength to pull her out of the depths of the... From that day on, the girl promised that she would never cross his requests and remembered this situation for the rest of her life. No wonder the guy was sick for a long time after that incident. She treated him for weeks, was always there for him, and didn't even help her mom at work. The woman could handle herself, but Chris wouldn't have survived without her. She owed him her life, though if he only knew what she'd do to him in the future, I wonder if he'd even risk diving into icy water and saving her life. She'd remember that moment for a long time. Chris had just pulled her out of the water, he'd passed out, and she'd thought that if he'd passed out a little sooner, they could have sunk there together. Though he doesn't remember it, she kissed him and thanked fate that he was there. That date is like a second birthday to her now. Remembering that situation, I wonder what made her do that to him, because without him, she would have died a long time ago. It's no wonder he's been out of her life for a long time, hiding and only showing up relatively recently. That day, they put aside all their shyness and even confessed their love. But it's all long forgotten like a dream, and it's a shame. They could have had a very good and long relationship, but she did it her way. And now they will never be able to trust each other the way they did before. Being in the same room with him, remembering all this, it's natural to think that everything can be brought back. But they've both changed, and it's not clear whether it's worth spending time on it. It's very good that the girl doubts and does it for a reason. Nothing happens for nothing. And if it were him, in their situation, no man would be so humiliated and forgive such a thing. They may miss that time for a long time, their whole life, but time can't come back. Things change, and so do they. It would be stupid to think that he so easily forgot everything, forgave her, and wants to start any relationship. She is not that naive girl anymore, and realizes that it doesn't work like that. Adults don't do anything for nothing. They're always looking for profit, and it's good that she realizes that. Meanwhile, Chris is on his way back. They said a quick goodbye, and this guy is anxiously awaiting details to see if everything is going according to plan or not. He can't tell anything good about the game. His fancy bouquet didn't help, and in the end, it would have been better if they hadn't seen him at all. He's even ashamed to tell it. He planned it to be easy, he was supported, and now he doesn't even want to talk about it. He asked the deputy to keep quiet and not talk to him anytime soon. There's a lot to think about, and he hopes the deputy understands that. All the more so, it's his private life which is nobody's business. The aide already knows too much, even though only the emperor should have known it. This guy is also understandable. First, he is initiated into the case, then they come to the place with him, and then, suddenly, they stop talking about it, as if nothing had happened. He agreed to go along only on the condition that they would talk about it. for their story was very unusual, and it was supposed to be fun. And in the end, he was afraid to speak to him. They drove the whole way in silence. The assistant wanted to get out of that carriage and finally do something useful. Some time passed. They met again in the office, and he brought him some information. At the age of 18, Adele marries a marquis who was much older than her father. It was rumored that this marriage was for wealth and status. And then 2 years after the wedding, she was banished for allegedly poisoning her husband. It is said that due to lack of hard evidence, they concluded that she was simply excluded from the Oswald family. This is all he was able to find. The gentleman replied that it was very strange, for he had personally heard also that she had met with the son of the marquis, and this he was much more interested in. He gets sick just thinking about the fact that she had multiple relationships while he was out of place and agonizing over the choice of whether or not to get revenge. After a short thought, the assistant suggests the same option as the emperor. Chris realizes that it is the most correct option, but wants to wait a little more time in case something changes. Meanwhile, the next day had come and the maid and her friend had returned, all the while talking about Chris. They insist on telling everything in detail because they've been in a bad place, and if they don't find out anything interesting, they won't forgive her. Adele, like yesterday, is silent, doesn't know how to express her thoughts, and it only makes them angry and nervous. They can no longer control themselves, and the girl understands everything perfectly well. She asked them to calm down and promised that she would tell them everything, but not immediately. She didn't have time to understand anything herself and didn't really realize what to do next. These two were already waiting for some romantic stories, and she really didn't want to upset them. Everything is not as easy as they think. From the side of the girls saw a handsome guy, a gorgeous bouquet, but everything is a little bit not as it seems at first glance. The Count is no longer that young boy. He is a grown man who values his time and would not waste it on a girl who once betrayed him very cruelly. Today she started by telling me how it all started, how wonderful it was, how they loved each other and couldn't imagine life apart. They learned how he had saved her, how they had vowed to be together forever, and also how she had abandoned him at a time when nothing was imminent. The girls were outraged. How could she even do such a thing? She was so lucky to meet a wonderful man and she did such a terrible thing. Their conversation was in full swing when suddenly there was a knock on the door. It was the same yesterday, and the first thing Tatiana thought of was that it was definitely him. After Adele's story, she admired him even more and would be very upset if it was someone else. They were knocked on the door again and informed that they came from the imperial palace. Ignoring these people was best not to be ignored. The landlady apologized for not opening the door right away and asked how she could help. Turns out they just came to tell him that His Majesty was very happy with the cookies, and yesterday when it was over, he was very upset about it. So these people have a personal request to her from the emperor. He has asked for these cookies to be delivered at least once a week, and more often if possible. He agrees to pay any money for it, and warned that he wasn't going to just accept it. They had to make a contract. Specify the exact amount for which he would buy her desserts. He set the easiest terms possible. Adele can deliver desserts several times a month in whatever quantity is convenient for her. And if he could surprise him and cook something new, he would receive a reward. But what kind, the emperor did not specify. The same day after lunch, as soon as the emperor's aides had left, 3 girls came in, though no one was expecting them here. It turns out they also appreciated the cookies they tried at the banquet. Even after everyone had gone home, the 3 of them stopped thinking about it and came to see if they could buy them, and also offered any money for her work. If possible, they would like to make a very large order so they don't have to bother her every day and ask her to cook in small quantities. Naturally, she could have reminded them how they had reacted to her gift originally, but she didn't, and even offered to stay to have a tea party, especially since cookies don't take that long to bake, and if they had time, she'd love to do that. Just had a lot of free time, need to distract and socialize with new people. The cookies were ready in half an hour, and here they are sitting, chatting nicely. And in fact, she had missed it for a long time. Adele didn't think they would turn out to be such nice people, and I really wanted to be disappointed in them. Everything was fine, but only until one moment, one of the girls let herself get into her personal life and asked her what her relationship with the Count was like. Adele was very surprised. She didn't expect such questions, and immediately realized what they came for, really. They were just curious to know how serious they were getting. Ordering cookies is just a cover for not asking about it right away. One of them even cried when she remembered how beautiful they looked during the dance. That's where today ended. They started asking if he'd been to her house, although a girl doesn't have to tell anyone who has or hasn't been to anyone's house. A nice tea party pretended into something strange. Adele felt like she was in some kind of interrogation and regretted inviting them to tea. I wish she hadn't done it. They've just ruined the mood, and now I don't know if they'll ever get out of here. Rumors about their relationship are spreading like wildfire. Everyone's talking about it, and it's only making her feel worse. She got tired of answering all these questions, couldn't help herself, and said that if they didn't want to talk about something else, they could leave her house right now. They were not so English friends that they had a right to know all the details of her life, especially as the girl remembers very well how they laughed and how they looked at her at the banquet. The guests thought she would feel very awkward, wouldn't want to upset anyone, and would tell everything. But it turned out a little differently than they expected. Her private life stays private. No one from will know more than she lets them. Let them spread rumors. But what really happens, only she and he will know. Maybe Tatiana and Mia, but definitely no one else. The girl won't let anyone else take advantage of her kindness. It's over, and she's not afraid to say so. Moreover, she has the right to treat them just as they have been treating her all this time. If they dare to cheat and cover themselves with cookies, they don't belong in this house. And Adele is very glad she could say so. It turned out to be much easier and even more pleasant than she thought. It was interesting to see their reaction, not only to her, but also to Tatiana and Mia. They are proud of her and show it with their eyes, because they would have done the same thing in her place. Evening has come. The long day is over. Adele is beginning to miss the moments when she is alone, and is even beginning to forget that her home is a private space. There have been more people here recently than there have been in years. And yet the habit of having someone to be there for her came up. She asked Tatiana to stay and promised that she would give her the day off tomorrow. They talked about nothing. The assistant supported her and said that if need be, she could always come to help. Mistress could feel free to call on her at any time. The girl helps that Mistress has been very exhausted lately and doesn't know how she would cope in her place. She doesn't even want a reminder of anything bad. She just keeps quiet and sometimes offers hot tea. But at one point when Adele was tending the flowers, she accidentally hurt herself, and it was because of nerves. She was careless, and the thorns hurt a few of her fingers. Surprisingly, she didn't make a single sound, probably just used to being patient and not showing what she was really feeling. Tatiana cried instead of her, as if she felt it all on herself and couldn't hold back. She's very worried about her, like a sister or a friend. Mistress feels it, appreciates it very much, but for now, there's no time for such sensitive conversations. She's got a lot of problems and everyone understands it. In the end, she didn't keep Tatiana long. The girl went to her home and the next day came. Adele is already at Mrs. Han's mansion, and it so happened that unfortunately, she couldn't keep her promise about a day off. For this, the assistant will get 2 days off from tomorrow instead of 1 today. And also, the girl took her friend with her. She also wanted to go and have some fun. She doesn't have any important things to do. Moreover, to support her friend, it's a good deed. They had just got out of the carriage when they were stopped by a not very nice man and asked what they were doing here, and in You're Invited, explained that they had come to Madame Hans's party and her name must have been on the list of invitees. She even gave him a letter of invitation so he wouldn't think she was cheating on him. She's not the kind of person who'd be interested. She wouldn't just drive miles for some party she might not be allowed to go to. The girl wondered how Madame could hire such an unpleasant person to work. He would spoil the mood of all the guests. Just as they were dealing with one problem, Adele hears a voice that doesn't leave her indifferent. She even turns around and saw someone, as if it wasn't hard to see from the crowd. She has an unusual outfit, as do her friends she came here with. This is Sarah, daughter of the late Marquis who used to be Adele's husband. Now I see why she reacted to her like that. It's not hard to guess that the girl hates Adele. She's only come here to get revenge as soon as she can. She used to be pretty good at it. She even purposely went to events she wasn't invited to, and her support group are friends who from the outside throw around nasty words too. Adele realizes that she can't answer her. The girl has a right to act like this, and she can only pretend not to care about her. The friend knows the whole situation. She can't find the right words to answer. It's a very difficult situation. What with the daughter of the ex-husband she poisoned in front of her? She doesn't have the conscience to say anything against her, say something nasty, or start acting like her. The best thing she can do is to smooth things over as much as possible and not provoke conflict, which is what she does. I have to get out of here and make sure she can't catch up with her. They're going to be at the same event and seeing each other anyway, so I'll have to try to keep my cool. Adele could certainly not hide the fact that she doesn't care about this girl, but she's trying to fix her reputation and not fall for all these tricks. Entrance. Her friends start walking in. They casually call her a villain, jostle her slightly, and give her a not-so-nice look. And also, there is a very interesting fact. Sarah is one of those who proposed to organize this party. The girl knew exactly and maybe even made a list of invitees. Accordingly, we need to understand why she let Adele be there. Is it possible that she is planning something against her or wants revenge? It's all very strange, but the girl tries not to show it, though Sarah, as if on purpose, keeps coming up to her and won't leave her without attention. No matter how hard Adele tries to avoid conflict, she can't. That girl provokes her. She asks uncomfortable questions about her father, and that's just wrong. She started it all and will regret it very quickly. Adele kept quiet for her own good, and she doesn't understand. Isn't Sierra afraid that she might be in her father's place? And a lot quicker than you might think, they're at a party where it doesn't take much to slip something into a drink and get it in the right hands. Adele knows how to do it pretty well, and is trying to hint that one more word and someone won't be able to go home tonight. She even laughed, which was very funny of a girl to try to humiliate someone who could ruin her life in a couple of days without much effort. Adele knows very well how crazy the girl is about the Count, and without hesitation, decided to tell what happened between them in the last few days. How he gave her flowers, asked her to dance during the banquet, and it didn't work out too badly. The girl can't believe it, but her friend was told that it did. She had never thought that the Count could like someone so much that he took the initiative, though she usually had to do it, especially offended that he chose Adele, whom she simply hates. She has no words to answer. She's completely wilted and has no desire to continue having fun. The girl planned to spoil the mood of everyone around her, but in the end it turned out the other way around. Sierra got offended and doesn't want to see anyone anymore. Adele didn't mean to do it. She was provoked, although it could have been different and everyone could have had fun as intended. Now the lady knows that Adele is not the one for her. She wasn't as easy as she thought, and it's best not to even try to come up with anything else. The further she goes, the more she will regret and be humiliated in front of everyone here. Adele promises her that, and even warned her. It is very interesting to watch two girls, where one hates the other and the second tries not to hurt the first only out of politeness. Although it can do it once or twice, just pities her and does not want to spoil the holiday for everyone else. After realizing the plan to fail, Sierra became so distraught that she even started screaming. From the outside, it looked ridiculous, and it seems like it's time for someone to go home. Instead of relaxing and having fun, people are watching this situation and are already unhappy that they wasted their time on it. They noticed how Adele tried to smooth things over, but Sierra did it her way and all the anger is directed at her. Meanwhile, the girl was able to tear herself away. She went inside and met some acquaintances who had recently been to her house. Even though they're not the kind of people she'd want to hang out with, it's better than staying with that crazy person you don't know what to expect. They at least pretend to treat her well and don't ruin the day for everyone else by being quiet, as they should be in high society. Would be much worse if everyone here were a stranger and had to hide just to get somewhere too. But as it is, she has someone to approach. They even have common themes, like the desserts she promised to bake in a couple days. Since the Emperor ordered earlier, she'll do it for him first, then deal with the others. As suddenly, nothing foretold trouble. Someone sneaks up unnoticed and doesn't let her breathe. She has no idea who it is and is very much frightened. At first I thought it was Sarah again, but I looked to the side and realized it wasn't really. She wasn't even around. But that's not all. The most interesting part starts right after that. Despite the fact that the girls had such a big fight, Sarah noticed that Adele was missing. Started looking for her with her friends. It was harder than she thought and suddenly opens the door to some room and sees someone catching her. She immediately calls for help. She wants to punish this rascal because it's her party, and only she has the right to do this to her. The other villains don't belong here. They and their friends tied him up, shamed him, and left him sitting on a chair with nothing. Everyone started laughing, and Sarah warned that it wasn't over yet. Once everyone had dispersed, she would be sure to deal with him. Meanwhile, Adele was taken to a safe house. Christian even came to see her. As soon as he found out something had happened to her, he dropped everything he was doing and rushed to her aid. And they can't imagine that something like this could happen at such a crowded party. He even suggested that if she ever got called to a questionable event again, she could invite him along and he'd be happy to be there. Of course, he's very interested and would like to ask a lot of questions, but he realizes that she doesn't really want to bring it up, and it would be better to just talk about it another time when she's ready for it. He purposely changed the subject, made jokes, told interesting stories, and it worked. At least she smiled a little and forgot what had just almost happened. It's another situation where he's helping out, even though she didn't even ask him to. He decided to come and promised that he would always do so. She is very grateful to him, and doesn't even know what she would do without his help, though Sarah has done just as much as him. It's a little different with Chris. She'll talk to her later, but she needs to pay attention to him first. She still feels guilty and doesn't understand how he can remain such a kind person, especially towards her. He even helped to treat the wound, tied a bandage, and offered to go to his house where a doctor would be waiting for them and do what was necessary. It's unlikely that the girl will think about it at home, but this way he'll be sure she's okay and got proper help. It's impossible to believe that this man is hiding behind a mask and is really just out to gain her trust. She already starts smiling at him, happy that he is so good, starts to relax, but for nothing. Sooner or later she will regret it, and not once. Suddenly, he accidentally tightened the bandage so much that her finger hurt. She took her hand away and accidentally punched him in the shoulder. It was so hurtful that she didn't notice it and didn't even apologize. Although the guy understands, it was a little wrong of her to do that. The girl explained that the bandage was very tight. She asked for it to be loosened, so it would be more comfortable because it seemed to be getting worse. Any doctor knows that if you make such a mistake, the situation can get worse. Then you have to be very careful, and there is no telling how accidental the situation is. Judging by the fact that he did not even apologize, we can assume that he did it on purpose. Although the girl was not seriously hurt, she was still hurt. Meanwhile, he pretended to be the good prince again, decided not to return to the hall, suggested we leave quietly and unnoticed, looked out the window, made sure no one was there and no one would notice them, gave her his hand and told her she had a choice: go back across the hall or jump with him. She hesitated for a very long time, afraid that something might go wrong, but then she thought she was tired of thinking and trusted him completely. She was tired of thinking about the bad, weighing the pros and cons, wanting to relax and let him do the work for both of them. Looking at that beautiful night sky, Adele felt harmony and thought, stop taking on too much and take advantage of the situation and do it without thinking. She asked him to help her, for she could not climb up to the window herself. It was very high, and she would have to take a bench, which was not there. It was a lot of fun. They got through that window so quickly and quietly that it was unlikely anyone would notice them, unless of course no one was in the yard at the most inopportune moment when they were leaving here. This situation reminded her again of the past, how they had fun, constantly running away from their parents, climbing wherever they could and enjoying these beautiful moments as children. If they had only known where this was going, at the very least, the girl wouldn't have left him, and they probably would have been able to start a good family a long time ago. And so, one mistake ruined a trusting, beautiful relationship, and there's no telling what will come of it. Probably nothing good. They weren't sincere with each other from the very first day they saw each other after all this time, and aren't likely to start trusting anytime soon. They were able to talk normally, but they never told me anything personal. They acted like strangers. But when you remember that he's hiding something and he's only talking to her for profit, there's no point in even thinking about it. Even if by some miracle the girl stops being embarrassed, tries to apologize and starts trusting him, it still won't change anything. He has finally decided to take revenge on her and will do it anyway, no matter what. It's unlikely that their situation can be fixed. They are doomed, no matter how much they want to be. It would seem that love lives forever and feelings cannot disappear by themselves. Money and power change people, no matter how some people try to deny it. Adele can't even imagine that this is her case, and the best decision she can make is to stay away from him.